Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life, a series highlighting the cultural and social interactions with the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Area Interreligious Ministries in cooperation with KNVA. Join us now for Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you're here today for Austin Faith Dialogue, where we have the fun but the bittersweet task of saying goodbye to one of the key figures in Austin's religious history. That's the Reverend Emilee Whitehurst, who has been the Executive Director of Austin Area Interreligious Ministries. So it's good to have you here, Emilee.
Thank you so much for having me.
But sad that this is the last time in this capacity we'll have an opportunity to talk with you. So the occasion is you have accepted another position. You'll be moving to Houston in the not too distant future.
That's right. So
we have then this time to just talk about what the journey's been like here in Austin.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a real pleasure to be here.
And I assume most people know, but just in case, you've been the Executive Director of Austin Area Interreligious Ministries, which is, define it for us.
Austin Area Interreligious Ministries is Central Texas's most comprehensive interfaith organization. Our mission is to unite faith and cultural communities to foster mutual respect, partnership, and transformation in service of the common good. We work with Christians and Jews and Buddhists and Muslims and Sikhs and Hindus and Baha'is, and the list goes on. Really, we really are span the spectrum of all world religions, and the task at our feet as an organization is to help people of faith, of diverse faiths, discern the common good and act towards the common good with all sorts of programming and events.
And I've heard it said, and I do believe it's true, that if AIM didn't exist, we'd have to invent it.
Yeah, especially in this day and age. It is such a wonderful privilege to have had the chance to serve an organization that is really about putting hope into action. And in a time where people hear so often in the news how religious differences are dividing and polarizing us, this is an organization that sees those religious differences as strengths and as assets for this community and as sources of unity and hope.
Now, when you were approached 2-3 years ago to come on as Executive Director, what kind of vision did you see for the faith community here in Austin?
Well, this organization has been officially incorporated as a nonprofit since 1988, and before that, it can really trace its history back to the 40s, where mostly Protestant pastors at that time were convinced that they could transcend their profound theological differences, which to us look so narrow on the spectrum of faith diversity. But I was mostly just incredibly honored to come into an organization that had such a long-standing history in this community and such a wonderful reputation of putting faith and hope into action for people in need, and really felt like we had an opportunity at that moment in time, this is about 2.5 to 3 years ago, to really raise the profile of the organization and to formalize and improve its programming and to really connect with the different faith groups who were yearning to tell their story.
Right.
That's one thing. This organization is only as successful as and only as useful as are the faith communities that are committed to this process. And we're so lucky in Austin to have such significant leadership from clergy and religious leaders in the Muslim and the Jewish and the Christian and the Buddhist and the Hindu faiths, among the others, who really are committed to connecting across the lines. And AIM couldn't do its job if it weren't for those leaders and those communities. So.
The folks who have the vision. Now, I suppose if most people think about Austin, they think live music, high tech, etc. Yes. And here you are, you've been spreading the word about the importance and the centrality of our faith to our lives and helping people see the great diversity in Austin. So as you went around in your role then with AIM, what did you find that surprised the public the most as they heard about AIM and its work?
It's a great question. Well, I think the average person in Austin doesn't realize that there are Sunni and Shia Muslims that are communicating and working together on a range of projects. They don't realize that there is a fabulous Muslim women's organization called Central Texas Muslimat that is really galvanizing the Muslim community around pressing social needs for women in that community. They have no idea that Jews and Muslims collaborate every year to repair a home together. And so I think what has been so fun is sharing the story with people about how many relationships this organization has helped bridge and build, and the fruit of those relationships for the city of Austin. How those relationships have borne fruit for this city over the last, well, depending on when you start counting,
right.
60
And
years.
are there some specific examples you can point to then of how these relationships have borne fruit?
Yeah. I think that whether it's specifically a Christian woman had her house repaired, actually a Catholic woman had her house repaired by Jewish and Muslim youth last year. Another program that we work on is English as a second language for refugees. And so we've had refugees from all over the world, most recently from Iran and Congo and Burma. And we've had Jewish youth from Congregation Agudas Hakim tutoring the refugees and their children in English. So that's a wonderful story. Last year we had our Interfaith Thanksgiving service, which is a signature event of the organization, and it was hosted by a Catholic congregation, St. Louis Catholic Church. Bishop Amond was there, and he spoke, and then Rabbi Alan Friedman spoke, and then Sheikh Umair spoke, and it was one of the best moments in my life to see these three paragons of faith committed and demonstrating that unity is possible. So that's just an example of some of the things that have come out of this organization's work in the last couple of years.
What a whirlwind it's been.
Yeah.
I wonder if there, now from looking back on this, if there's anything you wish you would have known when you started the job?
Well, let's see. You know, hindsight is always 20/20. I think I'm probably glad I didn't know exactly how much work it would be because it would have been a bit daunting. But I tell you what I didn't know, which has just been so delightful to experience, is the type of people that are drawn to this work. And they are the best antidote to despair. The people who belong to this organization and support it financially and with their volunteer time are the best antidote to despair I could have ever hoped to have. And these last 3 years, which are, you know, on the international scene, has been very hard. It's a sad time, I think, in some ways globally, and it's very easy to feel like there's nothing we can do. And these folks are, they are action agents, and so.
And based on what you know then, how does our interfaith group stack up against the interfaith group in any other place in the country?
Yeah, we're a wonderful example of this model for cities to have organizations that do both relationship building across religious traditions and hands-on social services and community action. So, of course, I'm going to say that AIM is the greatest because it's in, you know, the neatest city and, and on and on, and has the best faith community. But it's really, that's sort of antithetical to the spirit of this work, which is to like recognize the value in all kinds of places. But yeah, cities across the country have recognized the value of these kinds of organizations, and I will say Austin has really embraced AIM. The mayor and the city council and city agencies look to AIM to be the gateway to the faith communities, and are very thankful to have an agency in town that connects to the faith communities without proselytizing or without being more attached to one particular tradition than another.
So the purpose of AIM is simply to be a voice and a forum, not to be a place of conversion, coercion, anything like that,
yeah,
right?
Right.
If, dream a little bit, if AIM had $1 million deposited in its bank account tomorrow while you're still here, what would you do?
Well, that's the perfect segue into my next transition. I am moving to Houston to direct the Rothko Chapel, which is a sacred space for all people, and is a contemplative place. And I would love for Austin to have a sacred space for all people, where people of any and all traditions or of no tradition could come and be welcomed with the utmost of hospitality and feel that they were on holy ground, and that the holy ground was derived not from a particular religious tradition but from the hopes of the community that had been invested in that place. So I am hoping that in my capacity as the executive director of the Rothko Chapel, I can help Austin create for itself something like that. It will be very different from, it will be Austin's own. It was not trying to duplicate what's in Houston, but it would be Austin's own sacred space that would be the place that AIM could office out of and become a symbol for the city of our commitment to religious tolerance and unity. And I think I might need $1.5 million to do that. I'll take 1.5.
Okay, I know our viewers are taking note.
Yes.
The gifts will be coming in.
Yeah, right.
What have you seen in your past 3 years in terms of how we really do get along? Are we better? Are we worse? Do we still not get it?
Yeah, I think that for many people, religion has, there's a certain set of the population that I feel like thinks religion is just a dirty word and are tired of bigotry and hatred being perpetrated in the name of religion, but have almost given up on religion. So I think that there is reason for hope, and I think that the religious traditions, I consider them wisdom traditions, that are in which we are in desperate need at this time. I also think there's another set of people in Austin who, on some level, if they sat down and took a deep breath and looked at their assumptions, would presume that Christianity was still the norm here. I mean, after all, we're in the Bible Belt, and while Christians might be the majority, it's not the norm. This is an extremely diverse religious community, and that will only become more and more the case. And so, to the extent that we aren't ready to embrace that fact intentionally and to utilize that diversity for the good, we're missing a really important opportunity, I think.
Who are we still excluding then? AIM sounds very broad, but there must be still people outside the family?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that the average person may not realize how extensive the Jewish and Muslim community is, and how many people that they interact with might be of these traditions and they never really think about it or know it. So that's more what I'm saying. Yeah.
Where's as you leave and someone else is going to be leading the organization, where do you think the growing edge is for AIM?
Yeah, I think the primary focus of the organization at this time is to really focus on its sustainability. It's been around so many years, and it is an establishment in this city, and it really is, it has the luxury at this point in its history of really grounding itself and rooting itself and becoming financially stable. And it is financially stable, but I just feel like it can be taken to another level. I think there are hundreds and hundreds of people, if they knew what AIM was doing, would write a check in a hot second. And I think that we need to make that happen and give people an opportunity to really support on a local level what we all know is needed on a global level. So I think really we have such an enormous contribution to make to this city, and the challenge and opportunity at this point is to translate our good work into the community at large in such a way that we really are supported by the community at large.
If someone were to look at AIM, what would they? How would they know that AIM is at work somewhere?
Yeah.
You've mentioned tutoring, English
Yes.
classes for refugees.
Yeah.
Where else would people see AIM at work?
Well, let's see. We do an interfaith Thanksgiving service, and that'll be coming up November 18th, and that should bring together about 1,000 people of different traditions. We every month have an interfaith passport program where we visit a different faith community and let them host us to learn about, so they can teach us about their tradition and their values and beliefs. We will have just finished an Abraham Walk, where we brought together over 500 Muslims, Christians, and Jews to walk in the tradition of Father Abraham, the prophet who is the ancestor of all those traditions. We do housing repair 3 times a year. We repair about 60 homes and engage over 2,000 volunteers a year to repair homes. We also engage in the crop hunger walk, which raises well over $100,000 each year to provide for local and international hunger relief. So we are out and about. It's hard to miss us if you're paying attention.
Plus, you've got, as I recall, an electronic newsletter,
Yes.
delegate assemblies
Yes.
periodically, right?
Yes, delegate assemblies. That's a really wonderful opportunity for representatives from different faith congregations and interested individuals to come together and engage in interfaith dialogue and around their traditions and also around pressing social issues. So the mayor came and presented, and we had a discussion about reducing our carbon footprint and the role of faith communities in that goal. And we've had a number of different assemblies on everything from children's health insurance to affordable housing. But they're not political debates. They're time for people to really take stock of what they hold most dear and what their faith traditions might have to say about addressing these needs.
There's so much more we'll talk about in the second half of the show, because
Great.
obviously our faith touches every part of our lives.
Yes.
Thanks, Emilee. Thank you for being here for the first half of Austin Faith Dialogue. Stay there. We'll be right back. You went far over. Yeah. Glad you're here for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue, when we had, unfortunately, the sad task of saying goodbye to Reverend Emilee Whitehurst, who for the past few years has been the Executive Director of Austin Area Interreligious Ministries, which, a commercial, is the sponsoring organization for Austin Faith Dialogue. So Emilee, thank you for this, and thank you for all you've done these last several years.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
When we left at the break, we were talking about what the organization does. But tell us a little bit about you. What brought you to this point that you have been head of our interfaith organization, moving on to another wonderful opportunity in Houston? Tell us a little bit about your background.
All right. Well, I am one of the few, it seems, of people who actually grew up in Austin. So I grew up here and went to high school here and left for college and graduate school. I got a Master's of Divinity and then pursued ordination in the Presbyterian Church. So I'm an ordained Presbyterian minister, and the Presbyterians have a long-standing commitment to interfaith dialogue and interfaith education. So they have been wonderfully supportive of me in this position and have considered it, in effect, my ministry. So that's been great. And the honor that I have felt to be able to play this kind of role in a city in which I grew up and to meet people who I didn't have a chance to meet when I was younger and wouldn't have met unless I had been in this position, it's just felt like, you know, I really do feel like I'm probably one of the luckiest girls in Texas to have gotten to do this. So.
And we know you've been the right person at the right time, too.
It felt that way, yeah.
How does one prepare oneself for a vocation of interfaith work? Are there any tips you could give the rest of us?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different ways to approach this type of work. There are people who are firmly committed to their particular faith tradition. Say in my case, I'm an ordained Presbyterian minister, so I'm identified with a particular tradition and engage in dialogue and action out of that tradition. And that model really presumes that this kind of encounter is not designed to have people water down their tradition, but rather to learn more about their tradition by encountering other faiths. And that's certainly been my experience. I have felt like my Christian faith has deepened and been enriched by learning from the Muslims who have the discipline to pray 5 times a day and fast for a month. You know, asked me to look at where is that discipline and commitment in myself, and what are my outlets in my tradition for that type of practice, or the same with any different tradition. That the Buddhist meditation turned me to Christian contemplative prayer. So that kind of encounter has deepened me in my tradition and allowed me to connect, not by sort of finding the common denominator between the different traditions, but out of the richness of my specific tradition to connect with the specifics of another. I think that's a really important approach to interfaith dialogue, but it's not the only one. There are so many people these days who cannot find a way, don't feel comfortable in a particular tradition. It feels like very confining. My sense is it feels a bit like a box, and it's not an identity that's authentic. And yet they're hungry for spiritual depth and spiritual wisdom, and in that sense have a starting point of interfaith dialogue or spirituality. And I think each approach has its values and its weaknesses, its strengths and its weaknesses. But my attitude is that the religious landscape of this country is evolving, and while we are one of the most religious countries in the world, we are diversely religious and religious in very many different ways. And so it's an exciting thing to be a part of, and I think the good news is there's many different ways to plug in. There's not one right way to do interfaith dialogue. And in some ways, I think the sign of AIM's success is that people are taking initiative on their own. They're not needing to use AIM as a mediating organization to connect. People are doing that on their own and in their own ways, and doing their own exploration around different traditions and different wisdom practices. So that's very exciting to see.
It's a great ferment. But I wonder if, based on your experience, though, you see some sticking points still, where there still aren't perhaps opportunities for people who are not Christian, or there still isn't a welcome mat out for people coming from other parts of the world.
Yeah. Well, I certainly think that I have grave concern about the state of civil liberties for Muslim Americans. I feel very concerned about that. I think it's one of the places where we see potentially devastating erosions in civil rights that right now might be affecting what seems like a very narrow segment of the population, but my sense is if anybody's rights are compromised, all of our rights are compromised. Right. I think that's of grave concern. I still feel like there is just a lack of education about different traditions, and even of our own traditions. You know, for sure in the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions, we have been in dialogue for thousands of years, in some ways. And this idea that we have things to learn from one another and nurture, this is not a new idea. Civilizations prior to ours have been paragons of dialogue and conversation. And, our traditions are mutually informed. And so I'm not sure we really are embracing that to the extent that we could, and it still feels sometimes a bit scary that by encountering other traditions we're delegitimizing our own. And that's not the case, and it hasn't ever been the case. The fact is these traditions have been in conversation ever since they began. They've never existed in isolation, and so we're just continuing that tradition through AIM, and my gosh, it's so important. So you would certainly, as one of your final things here in Austin, say, come join us in AIM, right? Absolutely, yeah. It's a wonderful organization. It's like I said, it's the best antidote to despair you could hope for. Yeah.
Maybe what we're aiming for is a day when, if Austin gathers a representative group of its citizens, it does have the musicians, the architects, the politicians, and people of faith included just naturally in all that mix, right?
Yeah, I feel like we really, Austin could, if we're the live music capital of the world, I see no reason why we couldn't be the interfaith capital of the world. Maybe that's a little ambitious, but but certainly I think that Austin is such a dynamic and vibrant city, and we are not stuck in our ways, and that allows for truly creative collaborations to take place. And we have such amazing assets, the Crossings, which is a progressive learning center out west that brings in world-renowned thinkers and teachers in the matters of spirituality. Seton Cove, the Austin Area Religious Ministries, Institute of Interfaith Dialogue. There's just a wonderful array of organizations that collaborate together and nurture this city's spiritual health and well-being. We've got Barton Springs, which really pretty much says it all. And if I have my way, we'll have an interfaith sacred space for all people within the next 5 years in Austin. So.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Out of all this, I've got a couple minutes here for you to say, out of all this richness of Austin, what are you going to miss when you move to Houston?
Well, I think in some ways the greatest challenge of communicating my decision to leave to Houston, to leave to direct the Rothko Chapel was, people in Austin being like, how would you dare leave Austin for Houston? Particularly those of us who've grown up in Austin, we can be such snobs about how much better it is than really any other city in Texas, if not the United States and the world. And it's probably true. So I'm sure that I'll miss Barton Springs and the hill country and the limestone and the cedar trees. I may not miss the hay fever, but my mother and dad are here, so I'll miss them, and I'll miss these relationships that I've built. So it was not an easy decision. Yeah.
But you go certainly knowing what an amazing mark you've left on the city.
Yeah. Well, hopefully.
I think so.
Well,
so
thank
your last word to Austin, at least on this show, is what?
Oh my gosh, the pressure is on.
Right.
Well, I feel like that we have such an amazing opportunity with an organization of this kind that has this history and this depth to address some of the deeply troubling social needs in our community. 60% of the children in our public schools are low income. The cost of housing and the need for affordable housing is skyrocketing, and we still have significant challenges around racial diversity. I-35 still is a divide around race and class.
And there's AIM, for a place for us to come and
You bet, and that's the job of people of faith.
You've left us in good hands. Thank you so much, Emilee, for being here, for all you've done these past years. Thank you for joining us today on Austin Faith Dialogue. Emilee won't be here next week, but we will be, so we'll see you again next week.